Welcome to the T-ROH show. This is your host, Keith. We have Stu and Tony as the other hosts. Say hello, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
And please remember to get close to your speakers on this program. We have I believe, an interesting show tonight for everybody to listen to. We've got a couple of things that we need to talk about, because we've seen so many synopsis on how the government or how this country is structured, and people are just trying to figure it out, and we do understand that. But we do have a way to explain this to people so they understand the federal structure of this country. And then once that's done, this will help you understand, because we have Glenn Jerusha on the call. And we have Marshall on the call. He's the human rights defender on the case. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that and how human rights are violated and explaining how it's done. Okay, so we're going to start out as everybody asks the question, what is the United States? We have an answer for you, and we have a proven answer for you. You can go into our reignoftheheavens.com and go and just put in the search bar first in time or first in right. Be first in time, first in right, and it'll take you directly to the document. That document has been downloaded how many times, Stu?
We're rapidly approaching 1,200 in about a month.
Okay, so no one has come back and said a word. And you'll notice that there's been a lot of changes, and everybody's attributing that to Trump, and that's fine if they want to attribute it to him, but there are a lot of people in the background making these specific changes in this country. So what is the United States? How did the country start being called the United States? Now, the United States is nothing more than a very small island, and that's Manhattan Island. Manhattan Island used to be called the New Netherlands. Actually, the whole state of New York used to be called New Netherlands. It started back in the early 1600s, and they came up with a charter from the King of the Netherlands, and that was called the Charter of the Patroons. You can go look it up online; it's easy to find. And they, under that charter, was slavery on the last end of it. The last couple of paragraphs of the charter. Now, that eventually turned into, because military guys come in and say, well, the British took it over in I think it was 14 or 1787 or something. I don't know what it was. 1767. The British took that over. That's possibly true. However, the British also used to be the British East India Trading Company. The British East India Trading Company is a franchise of the East India Trading Company, which belonged to the Dutch. Now, the United States is just a very, very small island. Go back to that on Manhattan Island. The jurisdiction of the United States, which is set in all these cornerstones, and you can look this up online too, there's the cornerstones of the District of Columbia, would be the District of Columbia, the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, jurisdiction means regulatory authority. Okay, what that means is that they can make laws for the District of Columbia. That means that Manhattan Island makes laws for the District of Columbia. I'll let that sink in just for a second. Now, you can...
Can I give an example?
Sure, why not? Go ahead.
For those old enough to remember, when Obamacare was passed, it was Representative Nancy Pelosi that said something along the lines of, we have to pass it so we can read it and see what's in it. And that was one of the first revelations that, most senators and House of Representative individuals have no say in what's really going on. It's just kind of a
handed to them.
Yeah. Well, we could call it other things too, but we'll start off easy here.
Okay. And the very odd thing about this is that we know that the people's vote don't count because of Electoral College. Everyone knows that. So here's an obvious question, and I don't want to get into this too far. Why did the globalists allow Donald Trump to get into office? That was the odd part. I have a hunch. I know why. But we'll see. We'll see what they do and what they end up with. Okay, and how all this plays out. You don't get into that office without being a part of the deal. No one does. There's no outsiders. There's no nothing. It doesn't work that way. Never has and never will.
Yeah, and I think just to quickly expound on that, to try to drive the point home to folks if they don't have this realization, you can also look at it from the perspective that it's a managed situation, so that virtually all the people that are in national prominence, that is, that hold national positions in U.S. politics, are groomed and placed there. And what better way to ensure that these folks that you place into power do your bidding than to have them flawed individuals, sexual predators, drug addicts, pedophiles, etc. And so, perhaps that's starting to clear up some of the questions that folks have about why all of a sudden there's this monster scandal of irreputable elites throughout the U.S.
Right. Okay. Well, within the states, guys, you have districts. The districts are represented by representatives. They say, I represent the district. And some of them will say, well, I represent the people of the district. Now, what these are franchises. These are franchises of Manhattan Island. They're just franchises. They operate as a company. So they make franchises. And those, all 50 of the franchises are funded by the Bank of New York Mellon through its Federal Reserves. The U.S. Treasury is nothing more than a bond agent. They just sell bonds. That's it. That's all they do. Okay? So what you're looking at, and I'm talking about the courts, I'm talking about all the local governments and all these things that they have. They do their franchises doing business as government. And they're all on Dun & Bradstreet. They all are, most of them, if not all of them, are registered in Delaware as private companies, and they do business as government. That's all. They're just franchises. They have nothing to do with the original states and the original state constitutions and the original state names. If you want to know where the original states are, you have to go back to the original constitution that created that state, look at the top, and you'll see the name of that state. The franchises are all created, or are usually spelled in all cap names. They have all capital letters. And even if you look at the laws that the franchise creates for itself, you will see the clause in it, enactment clause, is in all capital letters also. And they'll mix a bunch of laws involved in one enactment. Now keep in mind, what that means is the original 50 states are all under the jurisdiction of the United States of America, the original Confederacy of 1781. The states you're seeing now, okay, the ones that are actually operating, those are franchises. Those are separate. Those are states within states. They're not the original state.
Created on paper.
Absolutely. That's all they're created on is paper. It was just written down, and that's how they operate. Now, the reason why they do this is because the United States, meaning Manhattan Island, because everybody thinks of the United States, and the first thing that hits their mind is either the District of Columbia or the country itself. And that's not true. You have to think in your head, United States means Manhattan Island. Now, the United States of America, which is the lowercase t, 1789, that's based at the Organization of American States. That's under its own union. So now that you know the structure, you start looking at the district court, or you start looking at the courts and how they operate. Most of them are private companies operating as government or operating as courts. You have prosecutors, they have private companies operating as prosecuting companies. And what they're there to do is to protect the franchise, the interests of the United States, which are the private banks. Now, if the banks or the Bank of New York Mellon wants wants a law, all they do is they send the law over to the Congress, hit their Congress, U.S. Congress, and they pass it. And like we said before, they sign it and then read it. Now, what's the payoff there? The payoff there for the politicians to do that is the stock market. When they see the laws coming in or they see this happening, they're usually told ahead of time. I don't know why Pelosi wasn't. I guess she was out of the loop that day. And what they do is they all invest in certain companies that they know that the law is going to benefit. So they buy low, sell high. That's how they make their money. And
right, which is...
You see the same people in office for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm. And you watch those same people go from, Billy Nebraska with reasonable net worth, and 7 years, 10 years, 11 years later, he's multimillionaire. Exactly. On what, an $80,000 salary?
Yeah. And that's where a lot of these billionaires came from. That's why the multimillionaires come from. It's because they're given what's going to happen before it happens. It's called insider trading. However, the laws that they pass, they're not subject to. So it wasn't Obama that gave you Obamacare. That came from Manhattan Island. That came from the bankers. He just took credit for it and sold it. Went out there, lied to everybody, told them it was going to be this and be that, blah, 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 so there wouldn't be an uproar. And all they're doing is keeping people calm. They're managing you. They don't care what you think. They don't care what you say. Your opinion means nothing. They just want to make sure you don't attack them. Go off on them and they don't have this massive rebellion. So you don't have original state jurisdiction because you are working and born into a franchise of the United States, Manhattan Island. Now, that being said, there are certain bureaus, because you have Soros here, there are certain bureaus that have been put in place because these guys, they call them globalists, but they're actually not. They're just a group of very rich men that tricked you into believing that you were within your own country, tricked you to believe in fighting, that you were fighting for your freedom. They tricked you into believe all these different things, which is some very evil stuff, by the way. And then they created, they were putting together what they call a world communist government. They wanted to put that in place. Well, luckily, the people woke up here quick enough. They knew that if Hillary got in, they knew they would have a massive rebellion, and that would cost a lot of money. And they didn't want to spend that money, so they went ahead and put Trump in. That was one part, because he had a better campaign message. And he's a little bit, kind of shoots from the hip. So they don't have absolute, full, complete control. They just, they have enough control. All right, so what we have found is a little bureau. They're called Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And their policies, and they have a common practice of, lack of due process and human rights violations. Now, what that tells us is that's a communist organization, because communists consistently violate human rights. They always have, because their ideology and their doctrine violates human rights. It's a very twisted belief. So, Darusha, do you want to come in and explain a little bit? Let me give you a little synopsis. Glenn Joseph Darusha, we put out an article about him, and we mentioned that he was being tortured. It was called an alien tort claim. And he was out in a couple of days. And this whole case, believe it or not, folks, was somebody that was trying to fight the fraud within a foreclosure. That's 3 to 4 months after, or when he was put in jail, this was dealing with MERS and dealing with all them, and I know a lot of you guys understand MERS and what's going on. We'll probably have to have a program, bring in somebody that is an expert on MERS and knows how to explain all that, okay? Found it was a fraudulent structure, and this is what Glenn was fighting. But this is what happens to you when you try to bring in righteousness or the light of righteousness to that fraud. And this has to end. We have to stop this. And Mr. Darusha has gone through a lot just to do the right thing. So, Glenn, you there?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you for having me.
No problem. What we need to know is, on the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, we would like to know how these guys operate. And I think you have a real good example of how that happens.
Well, yeah, they take it upon themselves to get involved with, a foreclosure system that I was, attempting to expose, and I was using some trust paperwork on a copyright of my name just in a protection, because they were coming to me like I was a posse comitatus individual sovereign citizen. And so what BCA did in making a warrant out for my arrest, not based on the whistleblowing and the righteous paperwork that I was showing fraud, is they turned it around and labeled me as a sovereign citizen.
Was the warrant signed by them?
The warrant was given by BCA. The BCA agent was the complainant, which is actually a third-party individual that got involved to make the charges more serious than what they really are as far as the foreclosure whistleblowing aspect, putting a dangerous label on me as a sovereign citizen. Now, I don't know if you want to get into what that actually means, and if people understand once someone puts a label as a sovereign citizen on you, how serious that really is.
Yeah, keep going. I'll go ahead and look it up on BringItToHeavens.com.
Well, basically, you're a domestic terrorist, and there's individual sovereign citizen group that has gone way back, and a few individuals, for instance, will take it upon themselves to maybe shoot and murder police officers under the name of sovereign citizen. Well, if you're labeled a sovereign citizen, then you're part of the group. Matter of fact, I have an affidavit that clearly shows what they think about myself just being labeled falsely as a sovereign citizen and stating that if any sovereign citizen in any state or any part of the United States, that I'm actually guilty by association of what these other individuals do. How insane is that?
Right. So that is pure communism, folks, because that's a lack of due process. You have never been charged with any domestic terrorism. You've never been charged with any count. You've never had a hearing. You've never had anything. They just threw the label on you and said that you want to kill police officers because that label is associated with a particular classification.
Correct.
Even if you don't even know these individuals that possibly could have done this way in the past, by the way. I mean, you know, they have sat here especially through SPLC, they have sat here and talked about this same issue of one kid who was 16 years old getting out of his vehicle, turning around and shooting two troopers. That was the only time that has ever happened. They bring this out over and over and over and over. Okay. Now the issue here, I've got the thing up on the newspaper. This issue was written in the affidavit. Happens every day in America. Many people have suffered due process issues and multiple human rights issues because of the process that has been adopted by the Department of Justice to silence whistleblowers. Okay. Now what's happening is that when you bring up the fraud in the MERS and everything else, the United States, from Manhattan Island, has dictated to the District of Columbia and through the DOJ to label those people sovereign citizens to shut them up. Now, this is what happens when that happens. Many people cannot leave their homes. They cannot work. They cannot go to events. They cannot see their families in fear of being shot and killed by the same people that have sworn to protect them. Believe it or not, most of them do not blame the police. They know where it is coming from, and one man decided to do something about it. Some really, and this was about you, by the way, some really good organizations have been labeled sovereign citizens and domestic terrorists that do not realize that this is an attempt to kill the people that are part of those organizations. They simply do not take it serious. And folks, if you start bringing that up and they start bringing this stuff up against you, that is an attempted murder threat, guys. It's extremely serious. The weird part is that once an individual has been labeled, the same people that entered that profile into the system are the first to say that the people they just marked for death are not dangerous at all, as written in the affidavit. Yet they continue to act as if they are dangerous and trample over all their basic human rights and political rights. Everything is done to the profiled individual on a hush-hush basis. The profiled individuals' families are harassed. They are told that their profiled individuals is dangerous and a danger to society. They are told that the profiled individual wants to kill officers and officers' families. Yet there is no hearing on it, no formal charges, no court date to prove the accusations, no nothing other than guilty, pay the fine, or spend time in jail. It is the most peculiar thing ever witnessed, and this is coming from Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Nothing is ever proven. Yet people hear these accusations and the rumors spread throughout their friends and families, and the profiled individual is isolated and their lives are ruined. Not to mention that every time they talk to a police officer, their lives are literally at risk, meaning they can be shot at any time without recourse to the officer. If there's any mention on the news, the victim is trashed as an anti-government domestic terrorist. Then comes the gang stalking, because most of the time the individual's cell phone is being tracked. The purpose of gang stalking is to ultimately push the profiled individual to violence and suicide, which is attempted murder. So they can either be killed or placed in jail for a long time. Now, this is what they do. This is what happens, and we're going to give you an idea of what T-ROH has gone through. Police or sheriffs, this is examples of gang stalking. Police or sheriff deputies drive down the street at normal speed, and when in front of the profiled individual's home, they slow down real slow at a snail's pace, and then speed up real quick and do the same thing on the way back. That's gang stalking, folks. You can't do that. And then they call it surveillance. That's what the local sheriffs call it, surveillance. Now keep in mind, these same people are franchises of the United States. They're not a part of the original state, but yet they believe in their own minds that they are working for their country. They don't know the difference. They don't know there's a difference between this, between the United States of America and the United States. They have no idea. Here's number 2. When a profiled individual goes to the store, 4 or 5 police officer cars show up and drive real slow behind the individual walking into the store. Then they wait until the individual leaves the store and follow them back to their homes. Most of the time, the individual is being tailgated by the officer behind them and following them home. Most are placed on probation, and a maximum amount of time that a license can be suspended is suspended. A huge fine is placed on them, yet they have no way to work and therefore cannot pay the fine or probation officer's fees. These fines and suspensions are done without any due process and no hearing. Since their reputation is ruined, most business owners go out of business and are thrown in jail over and over for not paying fines. At the same time, the individual is accused of being anti-government for not paying fines. So you can't pay the fine, and then they come back and say to you, "Oh, you don't think you have to follow our laws." You can't pay the fine, so you don't. It ends up not paying it. Then they come back and accuse you, "Oh, you think you don't have to follow our laws." See how they do that? They set you up. Or accused of not appearing in court when the individual has no way of getting to the court because they cannot drive and do not have the money to pay for a ride. They set you up, guys. It says, warning, be careful what you say in America. You could be saying something that could place you under this profile without even knowing it. And they go into a lot of details in the affidavit. Now go into a little bit about what they did to your brother while you were trying to clean this up with this government here. When you came over here with the government of the United States of America, you took your oath and affirmation, and we were cleaning up a lot of the stuff that you had done to try to get rid of that profile because we knew what you were doing and we knew what was happening. We don't do that for everybody, by the way. But go ahead, Glenn.
And they had a warrant out looking for me, not as filing some UCC paperwork that had no criminal intent to it at all. It was a protection. Matter of fact, I guess there's a case law that shows that I have the right to do that if I'm coming up against fraud, and I knew it was fraud. And then, of course, a couple of federal judges have already declared it. So what I was doing was right in the right fashion, but once again, there was no criminal intent. And with my government helping me through the process of becoming an American national, that I went ahead and terminated any paperwork that I had within the Uniform Commercial Code UCC filing. But meanwhile, they had a warrant out because there was a traffic court that the police officer labeled me also as a sovereign citizen because I stated I was traveling and not driving. But the reason I didn't go to court is one of the charges was obstruction of justice because I was a sovereign citizen. So with that said, would you go to court based on knowing that if you show up, who knows what they're going to do? So, of course, the BCA and the FBI and local officials started to go around to family members to find me. And they kept saying I'm a dangerous sovereign citizen, that I am with groups of sovereign citizens that have a tendency of shooting and murdering police officers. Well, of course, you can imagine what, my family is thinking. I'm, 60 years old now, never had a record, never owned a gun, never was associated with any kind of affiliation that one would think that maybe I'm lined up with them. So it's just a total fabrication on their part in the fact that they wanted to make something out of really nothing to create me as a felon to justify my whistleblowing. So eventually they got to my brother, and my brother documented it within an affidavit, and the BCA told my brother, your brother is in big trouble. He needs to turn himself in. And my brother stated, why is he in trouble? The BCA said, recently there's been shootings down south. As we remember, back months ago, there was several cops killing innocent individuals, and of course there was also individuals that were killing cops. And I guess, they stated they were a sovereign citizen. So my brother's going, so he's in trouble in the fact that some sovereign citizen group supposedly shot these officers down south. How is that tied in to my brother? And the BCA agent said he is in trouble and he is associated as a sovereign citizen, so he is guilty by association. And my brother goes, well, wait a minute. He stated to him, well, so what you're saying is if there is police officers that end up shooting, let's say, an innocent driver, does that mean all cops are killer cops? And the BCA guy actually said, no, that's different. So you tell me how that would work.
Exactly. So you have, so they associated you as a sovereign citizen, so therefore anything that they associated you with that, any label they put on anybody else, whether it be a criminal that kills and murders somebody, because I believe there was 14 police officers killed in about 2 weeks, just a little while ago. Okay.
Correct.
And that was all done by the same organization that is funding BCA, which is George Soros and SPLC. George Soros is funding SPLC using this same tactic.
Correct. So you have a BCA agent claiming prosecutor and judge by stating that I'm guilty by association. So if you're a member of the Lions Club and a certain Lions Club went out and burned down the building next to them, that anywhere in the country, because you're part of the Lions Club now, you're guilty by association. I mean, how convoluted is that?
So they arrest all, they could, under this whole thing, they arrest the whole Lions Club.
Right. So it definitely is very twisted and making something that is a complete fabrication, lie, and making me out to be pretty much a domestic terrorist for being a whistleblower, and then you compare it to their organization or a police department that end up, we all know police have to shoot, victims that are maybe threatening their lives, but we also know here in Minnesota that there's a police officer that's being charged for second-degree murder because he shot a guy in cold blood. And my brother's stating, well, if a police officer that's charged in that way, does that make all police officers the same as the one that shot the unarmed innocent person? And, of course, he states, no, that's different. Well, what is the difference? How can that be?
Exactly. So there's an obvious double standard going on here, and it's obviously that they're creating something out of thin air just so they can apprehend somebody or get them on their side to get them to turn whoever they want in to shut that individual up, because that individual was bringing out the fraud that was going on in a simple foreclosure.
Correct. And then at one point in September, I was apprehended, handcuffed, and frisked. And I asked, why are you doing that? And the officer that apprehended me would not clearly identify himself because I asked who he was. He was in plain clothes. And he said, well, I'm looking for the weapon that I was told you would have. And at that very same moment, within a few minutes, not one, not two, not three, but 4 squad cars came out, jumping out of the vehicles with their hands on their guns, ready to shoot. Now, of course, because I was handcuffed and the gentleman kind of waved to him that he has no weapon on him. But this is the point in the fact that he apprehended me with the assumption that I had some kind of a weapon on me and that I was a dangerous sovereign citizen that could have possibly had a big shootout with these police officers, where I was just going to buy a gallon of milk and had nothing of the sort on me.
So that tells everybody, maybe you don't want to go buy a gallon of milk. I'm just kidding you. We've got, in other words, now you understand what we're talking about when we say that you're stuck at home. Anytime you go out or anything, that's possibly what could happen to you that quickly. And this is all very quiet, hush, hush. This doesn't come out everywhere. And these agencies are funded by George Soros, coming from Manhattan Island. They're trying to get people used to saying that's okay. Just like the 9/11 Patriot Act was supposed to protect people, and it was turned on them within a month. Now they were the enemies. Oh, we're going to do the Patriot Act because we're going to worry about this and that and everything. All of a sudden, they start attacking people with it. They don't go after Al-Qaeda with it. They don't go after any terrorist groups with it. They go after the people with it. This is how the United States operates, and this is how the Dutch operate, and this is how the monarchs operate that run the Dutch from the Netherlands. And lo and behold, does it make any sense that the World Court, the International Criminal Court, is in The Hague in the Netherlands? It's coming from the same people, same country, same thing all the time. It happens all the time. But luckily, now that we brought all this out, luckily a lot of this is clearing up. We're doing what we can to get that clear, at least got him out of there, okay? And this was a tough case. A lot of the other cases that we deal with, folks, especially our government deals with, we do get them cleared up. So with one real bad one, we've got 10 others that really turn out great. Cases disappear.
Yeah, and I think we're all confident that we'll get it cleared up.
Yeah, on this one too. We do clear up a lot of cases though, and it's amazing to watch things happen. And we do appreciate the reciprocity. We do appreciate the respect from those people that are working behind the scenes to get a lot of these things cleared up. Because this same organization, not just with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, there's many other splinter groups and agencies that are infiltrated and filled within the federal venue that are this exact same type of people. For instance, we had one guy go in, and this was on a jury trial, or he was going in for jury duty, and it said on the document that he had to be a U.S. citizen. Well, he brought in his resident ID card, he brought in his oath and affirmation, and his resident declaration, and said that I claimed a nationality, American nationality. And the clerk just looks at him and says, oh, okay, you have this, this, and this, okay. And they just put it on their records, and he was free to go. We get that a lot, okay? But that's how it's supposed to operate. And it did operate in that particular condition. We just have some, if you're going to step in a pile, Mr. Durusha stepped in a big pile. He's right in the hornet's nest. Okay, and
yeah, but I think the point here that perhaps we've made it, I want to restate it in hopes of driving it home. You know, what we are exposing here, what we're expressing to the people that you know, aren't fully cognizant of what's going on is that the enforcement across the land isn't designed to protect the average individual. It's designed to protect the apparatus, which is why the DOJ, for example, will listen to Southern Poverty Law Center and their recommendations on how to quiet the populace rather than going after the bankster, gangster element. And that's important to understand, you know, in my opinion. It's the reverse of what the typical American might think is actually occurring out there.
It's there to protect that system that was put in place.
Right.
Now, here's a good way of doing this. Why don't they just not commit the fraud, and we don't have to go through all this mess?
Very good question. There's money to be made with legitimate business services.
Sure. It doesn't have to be like that. They don't have to do that. I just think, in my own humble opinion, I think they just like doing it because it's fun. I think it's out of hate, spite, you know, whatever else they, hee, I got this, and hee, I got that. I tricked them here and tricked them there, and all this other kind of thing. And, you know, the county recording gives it to MERS. MERS takes over the county recording. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and I'm going to try to get somebody on the program in the next couple of weeks that can possibly explain that whole thing and how this actually operates. And the easiest thing to do is just do it right, and you don't have these issues. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to trash anybody. You don't have to do anything other than make your money, go home, kiss your wife, your mistress, whatever your situation is, and take care of your children and raise them, and that's it. Just chill out. It doesn't take, you know, let's put it this way. It doesn't take the devil to create a nation. What it takes is people coming together and working together. And that's one of the biggest issues we have in the freedom movement and the patriot movement is nobody wants to work together. And that's where our biggest downfall is. They don't want to work with people. They want to control their own little sectors, which is fine. That's, you know, if that's how they want to do it, it's just not going to get anywhere doing that. You're up against a group of people and a network of people that stick together no matter how crappy they are, no matter how many crimes they've committed, no matter what pieces of garbage they are. They still stick with them and stick together. And that's what makes them successful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say that, you know, there's infighting here and there for vacuums of power that occur once in a while, but in general, they all pretty much see the larger picture, which is there's money to be made. So they don't ruffle each other's feathers too often.
Tony, I'm not hearing much from you tonight. You all right? You have anything to say, bud?
I'm doing okay. Just listening.
Did you have a long day?
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah, I figured that because you're not around for a while, and I thought, well, he must be having either a long or a rough day. So
A little bit of both.
right. I can announce. We're not going to go into a lot more detail with Jerusha's case. We will let you know what happens, though. We'll give you updates and let you know what goes on and how the system is supposed to work, and how the United States of America is slowly putting reciprocity agreements together with the United States to stop all this. Because with all the pieces of crap that you have in the United States in these bureaus, you have a lot of good people too. And those good people are the ones that we like to work with. They're not there to use you as a token of their ability to show their allegiance to their system. Okay, that's usually what you're seeing. Very weak people. So when you have somebody that's trying to use you as cannon fodder to show how dedicated and how much allegiance and loyalty they have to their agency and everything, that's usually the guy that doesn't do anything in the agency. He's the laziest guy there. So he's got to find somebody to use to make it feel like make it appear as if he's needed. And that's usually the psychology behind it, of what's really going on in those agencies. Okay, so we have the fourth and final General Post Exchange put together, and it's an awesome network. And we're going to be rolling that out probably next week on this program. You can go to generalpostexchange.com and sign up if you'd like, and you can hear about it, what we're doing. But if you would like to have a free store online, you can go there. And we're going to show you many, many benefits to this particular network and how it's set up, where the customer and the retailer within the market, it benefits both ways. And very little advertising is going to need to be done by the market, by the one selling. You're going to have an automatic customer base and the whole thing. It's really cool the way this thing is set up. So we'll go through that next week after we get all of the people that were members of other General Post Exchange, other forms of General Post Exchange websites put on this one. And this particular network and system I'm extremely happy with. I love the way it works, and is what I've been looking for probably 3 years. So if anybody's tired of one General Post Exchange going up and then getting switched, that's what's been going on. We've been trying to find something that benefits everyone, not just a few. And this particular system and the way it's set up benefits everybody, and we think it's going to really go quick. It's going to move fast as far as growth is concerned. We'd like to have 100,000 people on it by the end of the year. Because when they see the benefit of this is going to be incredible. Okay, do we have anything else that we need to bring up? Any other subjects?
My slate's clean.
Your slate's clean, okay.
One thing I did want to bring up and take the opportunity is Marshall Rinkenberger and DeRusha have,
a little bit louder. Marshall Rinkenberger and what?
And Glenn DeRusha have been thanking everybody that has helped them on their case, on Glenn DeRusha's case. But I would like to take this opportunity right now and also thank Marshall, who is the human rights defenders on the case, who had excellent communication between the human rights defenders and Glenn DeRusha, and had the information ready, quickly, and the turnaround to return the documents was just as fast. So thank you, Marshall. Excellent job being a human rights defender on this case. And for those who would like to be a human rights defender, you can go to humanrightsdefenders.international, and you can learn about the human rights defenders and also sign up to be a defender if you like. So thanks again, Marshall. Excellent job.
Yeah, he doesn't get a lot of credit for the for what he does. I mean, this guy is dedicated, and he's if you want somebody, in other words, if you're in a pickle, and he will be there for you. He's fearless. He goes into the court. He goes everywhere. The guy's fearless, and he will be there on your side. He does not like injustice. He really doesn't like it. And if you're that type of individual, then you can be a part of the Human Rights Defenders International, and you don't have to change your status. You don't have to do anything. You can just be a human rights defender. Anyone can be. So you don't have to claim, do a resident declaration or any kind of thing like that. You could just be a part of it, and they'll take you in and start training you on how it happens. And I was going to remind me, Darusha. What did the judge tell you? This was one thing that I wanted to bring out. I forgot about that. What did the judge tell you? And first of all, you had to prove that you weren't a danger to society. That was hilarious, by the way. It's so stupid. It's hilarious. That's what I mean by hilarious. It's not hilarious at the time, but they had turned this around, that you were dealing with just the fraud, trying to hide they're trying to hide MERS fraud. And they're coming around saying, well, you have to state that you're not a danger to society. Like you're the dangerous one, right? They're the ones ripping everybody off, and they're the ones throwing people out on the street and causing homelessness and everything else, and chaos everywhere. But you're the one that's supposed to be dangerous. So they switched that around, guys. But they threatened you just a couple of days ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, and, the judge for the first time was listening to my charges as far as the UCC filing, and I interrupted I forwarded my thoughts after he stated the UCC filing, and I mentioned, well, it's more than that. I'm a sovereign citizen, or they're claiming I'm a sovereign citizen, that I'm a cop killer, and that I may blow the building up we're in now. And he said, go on. And I said, this is what they're also charging me with, even though they're not bringing it forth at this time. And he asked the prosecutor, well, what about that? And the prosecutor said, well, that's just common practice for the agencies to bring people in. And you're sitting there thinking, wow, that's wonderful. Common practice.
And then they turn around and tell you, and that's by the way, right, what that was is that's a human rights violation. That common practice violates all 30 human rights that were written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by the way. So it's pure communist organization. And then he comes in and says, didn't he say you have to have a licensed attorney?
Yeah, he said when I do come back on the next court case that I must have a licensed attorney to represent me so that their court can move quickly and smoothly. And what I had to do to get out of my own recognizance was that I had to state that I was not a threat to the public because of the situation at hand. And I had to promise, of course, to come to court with, well, he asked me to promise that I would come to court, but the stipulation not within that promise, but that I do need a licensed attorney so that things can move quickly and efficiently.
Right. So this is, just so everybody gets it, this is a foreign franchise, because the United States is foreign to the state of Minnesota. A foreign franchise coming in and telling people here that were born here that you're a threat to society. You're this, you're that, and going through all these due processes. In other words, they're violating due process like crazy. And then they're telling the rest of the world that they're upset about their human rights violations. They go and lecture other countries about human rights violations, and this is the crap they're pulling here. the same people. So this is one thing. They don't give a crap about human rights, and they don't give a crap about people. That's the only conclusion that I can come up with. I don't know about you guys. They don't care about none of this. All they care about is bottom line, money, whatever, or getting away.
Yeah, they just want to ring the register.
Yeah. And if you live like that, man, that's not a way to live. That is not a way to, I've gone through the money train before, and I've done all that. That is not fun. Luckily, I never got that bad where I was, trampling over people to make a buck. But, yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But when a judge says you have to have a licensed attorney, that's a human rights violation because there is what they call pro se. You can represent yourself. You can represent your own person. And this case gets really, really deep, so I don't want to get into all that. I just want to bring a couple of things out on what has happened to the United States and the people that are now involved with it and what they've turned it into. And this is what they've turned Manhattan Island into. Now, they could have been doing this for the whole 200 years. We're just seeing it really now because of the technology we have and the communications and all that. We might just be seeing it. It's right there in our face. Could have been there the whole time. However, that is what's happening, and that is where it's coming from. Everything comes from that area. All the crap that is spewed in this country, it's coming from there. Okay, well, I want to tell everybody to thank you for listening to the T-ROH show. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and I hope everybody learned something. And I know we did. And we'll see you next week, same time. And we'll be talking about GPEX, the Continental Dollar, how to get it, how we can get it into people's hands, and do it legally, straight up, and everybody's good to go. Say goodbye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night. Thank you for having me on.
All right, no problem. All right, thanks, folks. See you next week.